The warning signs. Sarah Chen had spent 15 years fixing things that weren't supposed to break. The Galactic Science Institute's research station Epsilon 7 was supposedly built with the most advanced technology in known space. Its systems were self-diagnosing, self-repairing, and guided by quantum AI that could predict failures before they occurred. Yet here she was, lying on her back in a maintenance tunnel, staring at a perfectly normal power conduit that felt wrong. Maintenance Chief Chen. The diagnostic systems report all parameters within acceptable ranges. Came the measured voice of first observer Engstik through her comm unit. The Valaxian's multifaceted voice betrayed no emotion, but Sarah could imagine the subtle shimmer of their crystalline form that usually accompanied their puzzlement at human behavior. Sarah ran her hand along the conduit's surface again. The metal was cool to the touch, exactly the temperature it should be. The quantum flow readings on her tablet showed perfect efficiency. Even the subtle hum of power was precisely what the engineering specs said it should be. "Something's off," she muttered, more to herself than to Engstik. "The rhythm isn't right." The rhythm. Engstik's voice carried that particular tone all alien species seemed to develop when humans started talking about feelings and hunches. "Chief Chen, the power oscillation frequency is exactly 12847 kilohertz, precisely as designed." Sarah sat up, careful not to bang her head on the low ceiling of the maintenance tunnel. She'd learned that lesson the hard way during her first week on the station. "I know what the readings say, observer, but I've been listening to these conduits for 3 years now. This one. It's like when you hear someone you know well speaking with a slight cold. All the words are right, but the voice is just a little bit off." There was a long pause from Engstik. Sarah could almost hear them processing this thoroughly non-technical assessment. The Valaxians were brilliant engineers, but they sometimes struggled with human intuition. Their crystalline neural networks were designed for precision and logic, not gut feelings. "I will note your observation in the maintenance log," Engstik finally replied. "However, without measurable deviations from operational parameters, I cannot authorize a Level 3 diagnostic shutdown of this section." Sarah sighed and began gathering her tools. "At least let me install some additional sensors. Nothing invasive, just some old-school vibration monitors. They won't interfere with the quantum systems." Another pause. "Your request is irregular, but your previous maintenance insights have proven valuable, despite their unconventional nature. You may proceed with supplementary monitoring, provided it does not interfere with primary systems." "Thanks, Engstik. You're my favorite crystalline bureaucrat. You know that." "Your use of humor to diffuse technical disagreements remains a fascinating human trait, Chief Chen." Sarah smiled as she pulled herself out of the maintenance tunnel. The station's corridors were filled with the usual mix of species going about their research work. A group of Mindweavers floated past, their translucent bodies rippling with the complex thought patterns that had made them the galaxy's leading experts in quantum consciousness theory. A pair of archivists shuffled by, their ancient exoskeletons whirring softly as they discussed some obscure mathematical proof. 3 years ago, she'd been overwhelmed by it all. Now these alien beings were just her coworkers, each with their own quirks and personalities. She learned that the Mindweavers had a wicked sense of humor if you knew how to read their thought ripples, and that the archivists made surprisingly good chess partners. But none of them seemed to notice what she felt. The subtle wrongness in the station's heartbeat was growing. She'd first noticed it 2 weeks ago, a tiny discordant note in the symphony of machinery that kept them all alive in the void of space. At first, she dismissed it as her imagination. But it was spreading, moving through the power grid like a whispered conversation, just below the threshold of hearing. Back in her workshop, Sarah began modifying a set of basic vibration sensors. The technology was practically ancient by galactic standards, simple piezoelectric crystals that converted mechanical movement into electrical signals. But sometimes the old ways were the best ways. Sometimes you needed to feel the machine's pulse directly, without layers of quantum interpretation getting in the way. As she worked, her tablet displayed the latest station diagnostics. Every system was reporting optimal functionality. The quantum AI that monitored the station's operations was running through its cycles with perfect efficiency. By every measurable metric, Research Station Epsilon 7 was operating exactly as its designers had intended. But Sarah Chen knew machines the way a doctor knows patients, and something in the station's pulse was irregular, an arrhythmia that the sophisticated diagnostic systems couldn't detect. She learned to trust these feelings during her years, maintaining everything from ancient mining rigs to cutting-edge terraforming equipment. Machines spoke a language deeper than data, and right now, the station was trying to tell her something. She just hoped she could convince everyone to listen before it was too late. Pattern recognition. 3 days after installing her primitive sensors, Sarah stared at the data scrolling across her tablet. The vibration patterns were subtle, almost lost in the background noise of the station's normal operations. But there was definitely a pattern there, a rhythm that shouldn't exist. "Look," she said, pointing to the display. The holographic readout hovered in the air of the station's main engineering control room. Every 47 minutes, there's a micro fluctuation in the power grid. It's like the system is hiccuping. Chief Engineer Zixtal, a towering archival whose exoskeleton gleamed with embedded computational circuits, studied the data with their primary optical cluster. The deviation is within normal operational parameters, they stated, each word precisely measured. Random fluctuations are an expected behavior in any complex system. Random fluctuations don't have a rhythm. Sarah countered. She gestured, and the hologram expanded to show a week's worth of data. See, the pattern repeats, but it's spreading. What started in Section 7 has moved through the entire tertiary power grid. And look at the amplitude. It's increasing. First observer Angstick's crystalline form shifted, refracting the control room's lights in complex patterns that Sarah had learned to recognize as deep concern. The quantum diagnostic systems show no anomalies, they noted, but there was a hint of uncertainty in their harmonic voice. Because they're not programmed to look for this kind of pattern, Sarah explained, trying to keep the frustration out of her voice. They analyze each system independently, looking for deviations from baseline. But what I'm seeing, it's like when you have a crowd of people and they slowly start clapping in unison. Each person is just clapping normally, but together they create a rhythm that builds on itself. A new voice joined the conversation. A resonance cascade. Dr. Elevin, one of the Mindweaver quantum theorists, drifted into the control room. Their translucent form rippled with complex thought patterns that Sarah couldn't read. "You're suggesting the power grid is developing a self-reinforcing harmonic pattern." Yes. Sarah felt a surge of relief. Finally, someone who understood. Exactly like that. Each individual fluctuation is tiny, but they're synchronizing, building on each other. Fascinating. Dr. Elevin's thought patterns shifted to a deeper blue, but also troubling. If such a resonance were to reach critical amplitude, the entire power grid could collapse, Sarah finished, and take the station's life support with it. Chief Engineer Zixtal's exoskeleton wavered as they processed this theory. The quantum failsafes would prevent such a cascade, they stated, but Sarah noticed their secondary optical cluster was now focused intently on the data. Under normal circumstances, yes, Dr. Elevin's form rippled thoughtfully. But if the resonance pattern has already spread through the tertiary grid, the failsafes might interpret it as normal operation until it's too late. Sarah pulled up another hologram, this one showing her predicted progression of the pattern. Based on the rate of spread and amplitude increase, I estimate we have maybe 72 hours before it reaches critical levels. We need to shut down the affected sections and reset the entire power grid. A complete shutdown would disrupt critical research projects, Angstick observed. The quantum containment fields in the physics lab alone require 17 hours to properly power down, not to mention the cryogenic storage facilities. Better disrupted than destroyed, Sarah countered. She zoomed in on a particular section of data. Look at this. The pattern isn't just spreading through the power grid anymore. I'm seeing similar rhythms starting to appear in the life support systems, the artificial gravity generators, even the quantum communication arrays. It's like the station systems are learning to dance to the same dangerous beat. The control room fell silent as the implications sank in. Sarah could almost feel the weight of dozens of sophisticated neural networks and quantum processors analyzing her theory, running probability calculations, and struggling with the fact that this whole situation had been first detected not by their advanced technology, but by a human's gut feeling about a wrong-sounding hum in a power conduit. Finally, Dr. Elevin spoke. I believe we should listen to Chief Chen. Their form pulsed with decisive patterns. The mathematical models support her theory, now that we know what to look for. And more importantly, she has demonstrated an ability to perceive patterns that our standard diagnostic protocols missed. Chief Engineer Zextel's exoskeleton clicked thoughtfully. The shutdown procedure will require careful coordination. Each system will need to be brought down in precisely the right sequence to prevent the very cascade we're trying to avoid. I can help with that, Sarah said, already pulling up the station's maintenance schematics. I've been mapping the spread of the pattern. We can use that to determine the optimal shutdown sequence. As the others began to coordinate the massive undertaking of safely powering down a state-of-the-art research station, Sarah felt a light touch on her consciousness, a mindweaver's equivalent of a tap on the shoulder. Your species continues to surprise us, Dr. Elevin communicated directly to her mind. We build ever more sophisticated detection systems, yet sometimes what we need most is simply someone who knows how to listen. Sarah smiled. We all have our strengths. Now let's see if we can get this station's heartbeat back to its proper rhythm before it decides to try dancing itself to pieces. The Symphony of Chaos. The shutdown sequence was unlike anything Sarah had ever attempted. Each system had to be powered down in perfect synchronization, like conducting an orchestra where every instrument had to fall silent at exactly the right moment. One mistake, one system taken offline too early or too late, and the resonance pattern could spike catastrophically. Quantum containment fields at 80% power and holding steady, reported one of the archivist technicians, their ancient exoskeleton humming with calculation, decreasing by increments of 0.5% per minute. Sarah watched a holographic display that filled the center of the control room. It showed the station's power grid as a complex web of light, with the resonance pattern visible as a subtle pulse of color flowing through the lines. The pattern was stronger now, impossible to miss once you knew what to look for. Life support systems on decks 3 through 7 successfully transitioned to auxiliary power. Inks tick announce, their crystalline form refracting emergency lighting in complex patterns. Beginning power down sequence for main environmental controls. Dr. Elevin drifted nearby, their translucent form rippling with concentration as they monitored the quantum aspects of the shutdown. The resonance pattern is responding to the power reduction, they observed. But something isn't right. Sarah felt it too. The rhythm in the station's systems was changing, adapting to their intervention. It's learning, she muttered, studying the data streams. Every time we power down a system, the pattern shifts to maintain itself in the remaining active systems. Impossible. Chief Engineer Zextel's exoskeleton clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. The power grid is not a conscious entity. It cannot learn or adapt. Tell that to the power grid, Sarah replied, pointing to a new data stream. Look at the distribution pattern now. It's nothing like what we saw an hour ago. It's evolving. The control room fell silent as they watched the holographic display. The resonance pattern was indeed changing, becoming more complex, more unpredictable. What had started as a simple rhythm was now a chaotic symphony of interacting waves and pulses. New theory, Sarah said, her mind racing. What if this isn't just a mechanical resonance? What if we're dealing with something more? Quantum. Dr. Ilavin's form pulsed with sudden understanding. The quantum processing cores, they said. They're integrated throughout the station's systems. If the resonance pattern has somehow infected the quantum substrate, then we're not just dealing with a mechanical problem. Sarah finished. We're dealing with a quantum feedback loop that's becoming self-aware. Chief Engineer Sextel's primary optical cluster focused intensely on the data. Such a phenomenon has never been documented. Because most stations don't survive to document it, Sarah said grimly. She pointed to a new set of readings. The pattern isn't just spreading anymore. It's accelerating. We don't have 72 hours. At this rate, we might not even have 72 minutes. The shutdown sequence is only 23% complete. Angstick reported, their harmonic voice carrying an edge of genuine fear. We cannot safely power down the remaining systems in that time frame. Sarah stared at the holographic display, watching the resonance pattern dance through the station's systems like a living thing. All their careful plans for an orderly shutdown were useless now. They needed something else, something unpredictable. What if we don't power down? She said slowly, an idea forming. What if we do the opposite? Clarify, demanded Sextel. The pattern adapts to maintain itself when we reduce power, Sarah explained, her hands moving through the holographic display as she thought out loud. It's like a singer changing key to match a falling note. But what if instead of trying to silence the song, we change its rhythm entirely? Dr. Ilavin finished, their form brightening with excitement. A controlled power surged through specific systems to disrupt the pattern before it can adapt. Sarah nodded. We need to introduce chaos into its order. The safety protocols specifically prohibit power surges of that magnitude, Angstick pointed out. The risk of catastrophic failure is less than the certainty of it if we do nothing. Sarah interrupted. She looked around the control room, meeting each alien gaze in turn. I know this goes against everything you're programmed for. But right now, our best chance is to fight chaos with chaos. The alien crew members exchanged looks, their various forms of communication. Crystalline refractions, quantum ripples, mechanical clicks, creating their own complex pattern of uncertainty and decision. How long would you need to implement this chaos solution? Chief Engineer Sextel finally asked. Sarah glanced at the readings again. The resonance pattern was growing stronger by the second. 10 minutes to reconfigure the power distribution network. Maybe 5 more to execute the surge sequence. She managed a grim smile. Assuming we survive the first surge, we'll know pretty quickly if it works. And if it doesn't work? Angstick asked. Then we'll have given the station one hell of a final song. Dancing with chaos, Sarah's fingers flew across the control interfaces as she reconfigured the power distribution network. Around her, the station's systems screamed warnings in a dozen different languages. Red warning lights painted the control room in a hellish glow as the resonance pattern grew stronger, making the very walls vibrate with its intensifying rhythm. Primary power couplings reconfigured, she announced, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Starting on the secondary grid now. Dr. Ilavin hovered nearby, their translucent form rippling with complex calculations. The quantum substrate is approaching critical resonance, they reported. The pattern's complexity is increasing exponentially. How long? Chief Engineer Sextel demanded, their exoskeleton wearing as they coordinated emergency teams throughout the station. 7 minutes until catastrophic cascade, Angstick answered, their crystalline form reflecting the emergency lights like a disco ball from hell. Maybe less. Sarah ignored the countdown, focusing entirely on her work. The plan was insane, deliberately inducing power surges in a precise sequence to disrupt the resonance pattern. It violated every safety protocol in the book. But right now, the book was about to become irrelevant along with everything else if they didn't stop this. Secondary grid reconfigured, she reported, moving to final preparations for the surge sequence. A violent shudder ran through the station. Warning klaxons screamed as the artificial gravity fluctuated, making everyone float momentarily before slamming back to the deck. Gravitational systems are being affected, one of the archivist technicians reported unnecessarily. The pattern is spreading faster than projected. 5 minutes to cascade, Tick updated. Sarah pulled up the surge sequence she'd designed. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. A carefully orchestrated symphony of chaos designed to shatter the deadly harmony building in the station's systems. Each surge had to hit at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right place. "Dr. Levin," she called out, "I need you to monitor the quantum substrate. The moment you see the patterns start to destabilize, you have to tell me." The Mindweaver drifted closer. "What will that look like?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "But you're the quantum expert. You'll know it when you see it." Another shudder rocked the station. The lights flickered ominously as the power grid groaned under the strain of the building resonance. 3 minutes, Tick announced. Their crystalline voice carried harmonics of pure fear now. "Surge sequence loaded," Sarah reported. She looked around the control room at her alien colleagues, beams of crystal and energy and ancient metal, all of them now depending on a human's intuition about how machines could dance. "Everyone ready. The emergency pods are standing by," Chief Engineer Zixtel stated. "If this fails—" "It won't," Sarah interrupted. She took a deep breath, her hand hovering over the control that would initiate the sequence. "On my mark." The station shuddered again, more violently this time. Warning displays flashed as systems throughout the station began to fail. 2 minutes to cascade. "Now." Sarah slammed her hand down on the control. The first surge hit like a thunderbolt. Power roared through the reconfigured grid, making the station's lights blaze like miniature suns. Sarah's hands danced across the controls, directing the chaos she'd unleashed. Second surge in 3, 2, 1. Another blast of power tore through the systems. Warning klaxons screamed as safety protocols were bypassed and failsafes were overwhelmed. "The pattern is shifting," Dr. Levin called out, their form blazing with excitement. "The quantum substrate is—" They never finished the sentence. The third surge hit, and everything went dark. For a moment that felt like eternity, the station was completely silent. Then, one by one, emergency systems began to come back online. Dim lighting returned to the control room, revealing the tense faces of the crew. "Status report," Sarah demanded, her heart pounding. Tick's crystalline form shifted as they accessed the station's diagnostics. "Primary systems are stable. The resonance pattern is gone. Quantum substrate is clear," Dr. Levin confirmed, their form rippling with relief. The surge sequence worked exactly as intended. It completely disrupted the pattern before it could adapt. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She looked at the main display, now showing normal power readings across all systems. The deadly dance that had nearly destroyed them was over. "Chief Chen," Chief Engineer Zixtel's voice carried an unusual tone, something almost like awe. "Your solution was completely unprecedented. No known engineering protocols would have suggested such an approach." "Sometimes you have to ignore the protocols," Sarah said, finally allowing herself to smile. "Sometimes you just have to feel the rhythm and dance along." A new harmony. 2 weeks after the resonance crisis, Sarah found herself in an unusual position, presenting to the Galactic Science Institute's board of directors. The vast conference chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of species, all gathered to hear about the incident that had nearly destroyed one of their most advanced research stations. "As you can see from the data," Sarah explained, gesturing to the holographic display, "the resonance pattern emerged from the interaction between standard power fluctuations and quantum processing systems. It was, essentially, an emergent phenomenon that our standard diagnostic systems weren't designed to detect." A Mindweaver director pulsed with curiosity. "Yet you detected it through intuition." "Through experience," Sarah corrected gently. "Humans have been working with machines for thousands of years. We've learned to recognize patterns that go beyond pure data. Subtle changes in sound, vibration, even smell that can indicate problems before they show up in diagnostics. But this creates a logical paradox, stated an archivist director, their ancient exoskeleton creaking as they leaned forward. How can we incorporate such subjective observations into our scientific protocols? Maybe that's the wrong question, Sarah suggested. She pulled up a new display, showing the modified monitoring systems she'd helped design since the incident. Maybe instead of trying to make human intuition fit into mechanical protocols, we should be developing protocols that can learn from human intuition. Dr. Elevin, who had been invited to the presentation as a quantum systems expert, drifted forward. Chief Chen's insight led us to develop new quantum monitoring algorithms that mimic human pattern recognition. They're already being implemented across multiple research stations. But more importantly, Sarah continued, we're implementing new procedures that combine technological monitoring with regular human observation. It's not about replacing one with the other. It's about finding the harmony between them. The chamber filled with the subtle sounds of dozens of alien beings communicating among themselves. Crystalline chimes, quantum ripples, mechanical clicks. Sarah waited patiently, remembering how just weeks ago she'd heard a similar symphony of chaos in the station's systems. Finally, the head director, a being of pure energy contained within an ancient ceremonial matrix, spoke. Your recommendations will be implemented across all Galactic Science Institute facilities. Furthermore, we are creating a new position, Chief of Intuitive Systems Integration. We would like you to fill this role, Chief Chen. Sarah blinked in surprise. You're creating a whole new position just to have humans walk around listening to machines. We are creating a new position, the head director corrected, to ensure that we never again ignore the value of organic insight in our pursuit of technological perfection. Your experience has shown us that there is wisdom in ways of knowing that cannot be quantified by our most advanced systems. Later, walking through the station's corridors with Dr. Ilevin and Angstik, Sarah was still processing the implications of her new role. You have changed things, Angstik observed, their crystalline form reflecting the standard lighting in much more pleasant patterns than during the crisis. Many of our kind believe that technological advancement meant moving beyond organic limitations. You have shown us that perhaps what we saw as limitations were actually strengths we had not recognized. The quantum systems are already learning from your patterns of observation, Dr. Elevin added, their form rippling with excitement. It's fascinating to watch the algorithms adapt to incorporate what we might call hunches or gut feelings into their analysis. Sarah stopped at a viewport, looking out at the stars. She placed her hand against a nearby power conduit, feeling the healthy thrum of energy flowing through the station. You know what the real irony is, she said with a smile. If the resonance pattern hadn't emerged, we might never have learned this lesson. Sometimes it takes a crisis to make us question our assumptions. A very human observation, Angstik noted, amusement harmonics clear in their voice. Maybe that's not such a bad thing anymore, Sarah replied, still feeling the station's pulse beneath her fingers. In the vast symphony of space, technology and intuition had finally found their harmony. And somewhere in that harmony was a new way forward, a path that combined the best of both mechanical precision and organic insight. She smiled as she felt the familiar rhythm of the station's systems, now monitored by both quantum computers and human intuition. It was a good beat, one that spoke of safety, of progress, and of different species, learning that their differences could make them stronger together. The station hummed its agreement, and this time, everyone was listening.